Okay, the KTM, it's a brutal pain in the ass bike. It started running like absolute shit. And it turns out the battery that was in it, about 4 years old apparently, just completely died. It's been screaming at me low battery ever since I got it. So I knew it was coming. So I replaced the battery hoping that would solve the stalling issue. But no, right on cue it stalled straight away. Now last time I rode it, although I had the GoPro with me, I wasn't recording. I was only intending to take it down to fill up the tank with fuel. But it was running rough, surging, backfiring, and I was sincerely hoping that was all due to the fact that the battery wasn't charging properly on the bike. So I didn't even make it to the petrol station because it was running so rough and feeling a little bit dangerous, so I just took it straight home. So today I'm going to just take it back out just to confirm whether or not it was the battery causing it. And also this bike is an absolute nightmare to get out of this driveway. This back tyre just slips and slides on this grass. It still feels like it's surging. There's a slip. There's another slip. There we go. Yeah, it's still doing the surging thing, which I don't understand. I don't know what could be possibly causing it to cough and surge like this. This bike was running, as I said many times, smooth as butter. This is not smooth as butter. In fact, that amount of surging feels downright dangerous. I'm really annoyed actually because it doesn't make any sense to me. It just stalled while I was moving, and that's never happened before. Again, I didn't even make it to the fuel station because I'm not happy with the way it feels right now. I'm really frustrated and unhappy that the bike is still carrying on like that. which means I'm going to have to rip all this off again, check to make sure the spark plug hasn't backed out, because that's probably my first thought. I don't want to, but I think I'm going to have to get in there and get that throttle body off and clean it. Those are the only things I can think of to do before I have to throw in the towel, because that will be the limit of my mechanical experience. If I can't pull something off and clean it and put it back together, that's it. That's all I know how to do. Just like what I recently did to the CB125F, I've just relieved the KTM of its airbox. But unlike the Honda, this has got no stupid screens or shit getting in the way of the airflow. That is a clear path from one side to the other. But the purpose in ripping this out wasn't to mess with the airbox. It was in fact to try and remove that entire throttle body and give it a good clean. So I want to remove the throttle body off the KTM, but I've also got to pay attention to where all these clips and doodads are attached. So I think if we can undo one, that fuel line, that's the injector there, interestingly enough. So I'm trying to push that, but there's a fucking spider's nest in there. Okay, I'll probably need 2 hands to remove this. I'll check in when I'm done. I removed that just with a flathead screwdriver. Seems to be all the wires out the way, which means I should be able to get in there and remove the rest. Okay, I've got to remove the throttle cable, and that appears just to be those 2 Torx screws there. I've got some Torx bits inside, so I'll get to removing those. And as for the cable, it's just a very typical sort of slotted design, so that shouldn't be too difficult to remove. Not for the lack of struggles, but there's the throttle body from the KTM. One of my primary jobs will be replacing this idle adjustment screw, because I appear to have chewed out the head of it, trying to raise the idle a bit to stop the stalling. So I'll get the calipers and I'll measure that as a baseline, because I was measuring it with the OBD2 scanner as I was adjusting it. But while I'm in here, I'll be able to give that an almighty clean. It doesn't honestly look that bad in there. Cute little injector. But hopefully by giving that a bit of a spruce, on the face of it, it doesn't look too bad. But then when you look in there, there is a bit of carbon buildup, which could potentially block the idle flow, the airflow at idle. Basically, if cleaning this and being able to adjust the idle properly doesn't fix the stalling issue, man, I don't know what will. This is as deep as I'm willing to dive into this bike. Beyond getting this job sorted, I don't know what else I can do. Aside from being time consuming, it wasn't a particularly difficult bike. There's just not a lot of room to get in there. So I've got to shove a rag down the opening into the intake so it doesn't get filth in there. And then I'll bag that up until I can clean it. It's now the next day, and I have gone through and thoroughly sprayed that with throttle body cleaner. It seems to have cleaned a fair bunch of filth out of it, and there's no carbon blocking up these passages anymore, so I'm hoping that'll make a considerable difference. I've also replaced the idle adjustment screw, so that should make it easier to do some fine adjustments. But I lost one of these Torx screws in the belly of the bike. So even before I go putting this back together, I need to go pop that shroud off and retrieve my bolt. I managed to get it without removing the pan, because luckily there's, can we see? Probably not. there's a hole here. I was able to get it out just by giving it a bash. So now is the fun process of reassembling all of this. Now I am not going to film because I need to concentrate. It's a little bit confusing because there's so much going on, but it should be fairly intuitive to put back together. So I'll see you when I'm done. Alright, so the throttle body is more or less reinstalled. Everything's plugged in. The throttle cable's reconnected properly, which is here. It's really difficult to show you because the frame's in the way. But now it's time for me to go in and reinstall the airbox and make sure that these pipes plumb back up. And provided that goes on without a hitch, we can reinstall the tank. Right, airbox is all buttoned up again. I can now move on to reinstalling the tank, the ECU and the body panels. Then it will be time to reinstall the battery and fingers crossed it'll fire right up. Okay, the tank and panels are on, or what passes for on. All I need to do now is connect the battery, plug in the OBD2 scanner, turn the key, and cross our fingers. This is all plugged in. Let's turn the key and hope. Okay, so there's no codes in the ECU yet, which is good. Okay, so that throttle position is still reading at 14.5%. So I'm gonna reset that to the default, 10.5, and go from there. Right, idle has been set at 10.6, close enough for me. It's time to unplug this and fingers crossed it fires up. Before I actually turn the key on this thing, at the start of the video I was saying I don't understand why it's bogging. But you grow and learn, and what I understand was happening was forcing the bike to raise the idle here to stop the stalling. Basically, the idle and the throttle is controlled all by the ECU. So, by forcing the throttle open, the throttle position sensor thought that I was cracking the throttle by almost 5%, and so it was giving the bike that extra squirt of fuel, and that's what was causing the surge. So I hope that by resetting the idle position, which is exactly why I use the OBD2 scanner to do it, we should see an end to that stalling, or not stalling, the surging and rough running. Now, having had cleaned out that throttle body and a fair amount of gunk did come out of it, as I say, I'm hoping that is what will solve the stalling issue. But I haven't tried to start it yet, so let's go do that now. Right, now we've got an engine code coming up, so it's time to plug in the scanner and try and figure out what I haven't plugged in properly. Okay, idle air control circuit. Basically, I just need to go around the throttle body and check all the plugs to make sure that they're all seated properly. It's all to do with the throttle body, which kind of tracks. Found the culprit straight away. I remember that thing coming undone and I forgot to plug it in at the time. So I'll get that one plugged in and then we'll try again. Just for the record, I had to rip everything off just to plug that fucker in. Right, I'll check in once it's all back together again. Alright, before I put the tank cover back on, I'm going to just try this again. That's it. And it started so easy too. Happy with that. I've got to finish putting it back together, and I don't have time to take it for a ride until later this afternoon, but let's get it all back together. Check it out. That's one fully cleaned and reinstalled throttle body. I have never heard it start or idle that good. And that's a cold start too. It's been running for 10 minutes straight without a stall. Sounds pretty good to me. Alright, let's see if the surging thing happens. Alright, we are chasing daylight right now. Feels good. Okay, it's telling me off a low fuel level, that's fine. We're going to go and try and get down to the fuel station. Alright, I think the surging is fixed. Yeah, I think it is. It feels good to me. Yeah, we've definitely fixed that surge. Yeah, this bike is fixed. It is so much smoother. And I'll tell you right now, if I hadn't have messed with the idle speed, nothing would have gone wrong. But if I hadn't have messed with the idle speed, I never would have pulled the throttle off. She's back. Just to put into perspective, I did not even ride the bike this far because it was surging and feeling unsafe. Now that I've returned the idles to stock and cleaned the filth out of the throttle body, it's running really smooth. We won't really know if we've solved the stalling issue though until obviously we come to a stop. Feels good. It had a cough then. Ah, does it feel good? Ah, it stalled. That's disappointing.